This is Ahval Online, meeting point of accurate news and free comment on the current affairs of Turkey. Welcome to our podcast series.
Hello, dear Ahval listeners. I'm Gülten Sarı, and today we will talk about, again, the US-Turkish relations, what's going on between two countries. As usual, my guest is Senior Program Director for Turkey at the Foundation for Defence of Democracies, Aykan Erdemir. Aykan Erdemir is with us for 12 minutes from Washington. Welcome to the program, Mr. Erdemir.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, today we will discuss three issues. One is State Department's special watch list. They didn't put Turkey on the list of freedom of belief or religion. So I think it's a problem. And another one is Biden Summit for Democracy, which will be held on Thursday and Friday. Turkey was not invited to this summit, and also the S-400 issue, which Turkey bought from Russia. This continues to be a problem between two countries. However, recently the US meetings, not a top issue, this issue. What's going on? Let's start from this State Department special watch list issue.
So the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom is a federal and nonpartisan and independent body. And each year it issues an annual report, which presents an overview of the state of the freedom of religion or belief across the world. And USCIRF over the years has consistently recommended Turkey to be put on the State Department's special watch list for egregious violations of freedom of religion or belief. And being a NATO member, Turkey has often received favorable treatment from the State Department as Foggy Bottom looked the other way concerning USCIRF recommendations. This year, there was an expectation that the State Department could finally take some action because, as we all observed, last year was a particularly troubling year for minority rights and religious freedoms in Turkey. Erdoğan has not only converted Hagia Sophia into a mosque, but also the supremacist language he and his senior aides used, such as, the remnants of the Byzantines or remnants of the sword or, the spirit of conquest, really troubled Turkey watchers, because this was a way to relegate Turkey's religious minorities from lesser citizens into subjects of a neo-Ottoman mentality. So there was a lot of expectation that the State Department would finally place Turkey on its special watch list, which would be a step toward the highest category, which would be a country of particular concern category that would then start potentially triggering sanctions based on the International Religious Freedom Act. But once again, Turkey received, let's say, lenient treatment and avoided the special watch list designation. And in the immediate aftermath, we have seen USCIRF issue kind of an update report on the state of religious freedoms in Turkey, where the institution pointed out further violations of freedom of religion or belief. And this was perceived as a message that USCIRF will continue to insist on its recommendations to get Turkey in the State Department's special watch list to begin with, and possibly put the country on a country of particular concern designation finally, which could lead to a new form of sanctions against Ankara.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the summit for democracy, which will be held, as we said, on Thursday and Friday. What's the main purpose of this summit? Why Turkey was not invited to this summit?
Now, the so-called Biden Summit for Democracy has been a trademark policy for the Biden administration during its first year in office. During the election campaign, Biden pledged multiple times to a human rights-centered foreign policy. And he also promised to bring the United States, back in the world and a close coordination with democratic allies. So the Democracy Summit that we will have later this week is a step towards that. It was Biden's attempt to get human rights back at the center of US foreign policy, and also to give the appearance that the United States is in close coordination with democratic allies. Now, this comes at an important time because over the summer and during the fall, the Biden administration received quite strong criticism from independent media outlets for failing to uphold a human rights-centered policy, especially Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan and then cutting off deals with Qatar and Turkey, who are not necessarily, who don't necessarily have a good human rights track record, led to criticism. In fact, Reuters reported that in some of the bilateral meetings with Turkish counterparts, Biden failed to mention human rights issues. So that everyone was watching with close interest to see whether Turkey would make it to the final cut of the invitees. And as expected, the Erdoğan government was not invited. I think although the Biden administration would like to continue a pragmatic relationship with the Erdoğan government, especially when it comes to Afghanistan, still the Erdoğan regime is too toxic across the US political spectrum, meaning it would be very embarrassing for Biden to pose alongside Erdoğan at a democracy summit at a time when Turkey is one of the worst offenders in academic freedoms, in media freedoms, in the rule of law and democracy. So this is, I think, yet another reminder, not only of the cold relations between Washington and Ankara, but also that in Washington, there is still a bipartisan consensus that Turkey is neither a functioning democracy nor a close ally that merits such an invitation. So we will see how the summit continues. Many observers argue that it will be an anticlimactic event and not much will come out of it. But nevertheless, the signaling for Ankara remains negative, and regardless of whether the summit is a success or not, it will end up as a failure on the Erdoğan government's part.
Yeah, as a contribution, what you said, even if we know that the Biden administration tries to kind of give a green light to the Erdoğan administration, we know that there is a kind of big object to this purpose in the Congress by many senators, I think.
Definitely, when we take a look at Congress, both in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, there is a strong anti-Erdoğan consensus. And just this week, we have seen, again, one of the senators issue a statement criticizing Turkey and the Osman Kavala case. And there was a bipartisan welcome to the Council of Europe's decision to start infringement proceedings against Turkey concerning the Osman Kavala case. So the Democracy Summit really came at a very bad time for Erdoğan when he was repeatedly the target of criticisms across the US political spectrum.
Yeah, finally, let's focus on a bit S-400 air missiles issue. You pointed out that recently this issue not a hot topic of the US politics during meetings. What's going on in this issue?
Now, there seems to be, let's say, on the one hand, a strong bipartisan consensus that Turkey's purchase of the S-400 air defense system from Russia is a major crisis. But at the same time, the Biden administration, without necessarily softening Washington's stance, would like to find ways of working with Turkey. And one way the Biden administration has done this is to refrain from raising the issue in bilateral meetings. We have seen that during the high-level working group of Turkish officials at the Pentagon, there was no mention of the S-400 in the readout. We have similarly seen that National Security Advisor Jack Sullivan's call with Ibrahim Kalın, Erdogan's spokesperson, also had no mention of the issue in the readout. And this, I think, is a sign that the Biden administration is trying to keep the S-400 out of these bilateral meetings, while there is no softening of the tone or policy when it comes to the CAATSA sanctions. In fact, the US administration remains committed to issuing a second round of CAATSA sanctions if Erdogan purchases a second batch of the S-400. And at the same time, during a recent visit to Ankara, Deputy Secretary for the State Department, Karen Donfried, warned Ankara that they should not take out the wrong message from the ongoing negotiations about India's potential purchase of the S-400 air defense system. She reminded Turkey is a NATO ally and has to answer to different standards, as opposed to India, which is an increasingly important partner to the United States, but which has traditionally been an importer of Russian weapons systems. So at this point, I think we will continue to see a strict policy when it comes to CAATSA sanctions. But at the same time, the Biden administration will continue this back-channel diplomacy with Ankara when it comes to Afghanistan, or when it comes to working groups for the potential sale of F-16 fighter jets and modernization kits. But again, as you reminded in the previous question, one should never disregard the role the Congress plays. There is still a strong bipartisan consensus in both chambers of the Congress, not only concerning the S-400 issue, but also against Turkey's purchase of the F-16 jets, and the informal freeze against Turkey's purchase of major defense items from the United States is still in place. And I don't really see any signs of softening. And we should also keep in mind that some of the leading figures in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee remain committed to blocking such a deal. So overall, I think as long as Erdogan is in power in Turkey, this deadlock will remain in place.
Yeah, also, US seems to have focused on a bit Ukraine, crisis in Ukraine between Russia. So as you said, it doesn't mean that it doesn't pay attention to Turkey. Okay, thank you very much for joining us this week. And then next week, we will continue to talk about the relations between two countries.
Thank you for having me.
You can follow Ahval News Online podcast series through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, and Spreaker. All you need to know about Turkey is here, for your ears, mind, and attention. Thank you for listening to our podcast.